Let's open our Bibles to Mark chapter 4. It's on page 765 or 688. So 765 or 688. So we've seen kind of at each part or each section of Mark's account of the gospel, the good news of Jesus, he reveals a little bit more about Jesus, his person, his purpose, his power, his self-understanding, right? So let's look at Mark chapter 4, verse 35, and see what Mark's now revealing to us about Jesus. So verse 35, this is under the heading, Jesus calms the storm. All right. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care? We're going to drown." Okay, so just looking at that, what does this story tell you about the disciples? They doubted. Yeah. They doubted. That's good news for us, by the way. All right, we've said this before. It's good news that we see the disciples doubting. Why is that good news? What was that? They're just like us. Right? Yeah, I want to do a video someday soon with like people with black shirts, like writing down there like what they were before they knew Jesus, or before they became connected to the church, right? I was a drug dealer. I was an addict. I believed, I lived only for myself, you know. I didn't care. I used my body whatever way I wanted to, you know, and then to them just be like Hulk Hogan it and like tear off the black shirt and have a white shirt underneath and be like, now I trust in Jesus alone, you know, and now I'm clean. You know, still broken, but being healed. You know, those kind of messages. And if you want to do that, you know, that'd be awesome. We'd really love to do that. Before, you don't have to say anything, right? Takes away that fear. All you got to do is like, you know, tear your shirt open and have another shirt underneath, by the way. And, you know, and I'll start off and be like, you know, who I was, and I'll tear it off, and it'll be pastor, right? And at the end, I'll tear that off, and there'll be another shirt that just says just like everybody else, right? To remind us that there is no one that's above the stink of it all, right? There's no one who's arrived in this life, right? Even the disciples you see filled with doubts, right? Even after the resurrection, filled with doubts. Even years into ministry, forgetting how the gospel applies the truth to their situation. And you see like the Apostle Paul chewing out the Apostle Peter because he doesn't practice what he preaches, right? It's good news. It means we're all in a place where God can save us, because no one but Jesus was at a place where God must accept him, right? Jesus was the only one who was perfect, the only one who was pure, the only one that did what was good and right all the time, who did what the Father wanted, right? And his righteousness, his goodness before God becomes ours through belief in baptism, right? Through faith in Jesus, his righteousness is transferred to us, is imputed, if you want the theological term, right? It becomes ours. That's what, well, we don't have our logo up there. The great exchange means, right? God became like us so we could become like him, right? The perfect Son of God traded places with us, gave everything that belonged to him, and took all of what belonged to us on the cross, right? So it's good news that, that they didn't always believe, even after seeing all that they saw, right? And we know already they heard the voice at the baptism saying, "This is my beloved Son I love," right? They saw him do miracles. You know, he had done the wine miracle, 30 gallons of water into wine at a wedding, right? Pretty awesome God, right? They saw him, cast out demons and heal the sick. And just right before this, preach like nobody's business, right? As he gave the parable of the sower and other parables of the kingdom, which we talked about last week, right? And so they should have known. Right. Anything else? Does this tell us anything else about the disciples or the situation that they were in? They didn't quite understand it, right? They thought they understood, but they didn't have the faintest clue, right? Yeah, that's pretty big. Martha, were you going to say the same thing, or? Yeah, yeah, we can't comprehend fully, the magnitude of his power, right? The magnitude of who he is as the Son of God, as we say, 100% God and 100% man, right? Fully God, fully man, which is good news. He's the one who can die for us. His death is worth a trade for all humanity's death, right? And his goodness as a perfect human being then is a perfect trade for us human beings who do not do what is right. Right? But you see here that what were most of the disciples before Jesus called them? Fishermen, right? What tells you about their situation if they think they're going to die? It's pretty bad. They're really scared, right? These are experienced fishermen who spent their lives making a living, following their fathers, living on this lake. And the storm's so bad, they know they're not going to make it. All right? The Sea of Galilee is 700 foot below sea level, right? And 30 miles south of Mount Hermon, which is like 9,200 feet tall. And so what happens in this area is that the cool air from Mount Hermon comes down and tumbles into this valley where the Sea of Galilee is, and the warm air is rising up from the water. And you know what happens when two, now I'm blanking the name, word for it, but when these two air streams, air masses, right, run into each other in their different temperature. You get turbulence, right? And in a moment, very calm seas can become like great squalls, great walls of water, great waves, right? And a storm can come upon the Sea of Galilee just before you could even know what's going on, right? And the disciples apparently are now caught in the most difficult storm they had ever encountered. And what's Jesus doing? He's sleeping, all right? You've seen like pictures of these fishing boats, right? I mean, they're not much bigger than probably your fishing boat if you've got one. It might be twice the size of it, but if you have waves like crashing inside to the boat and water's filling up, right? It's pretty amazing that Jesus is sleeping in the back of the boat on a pillow, right? And this is actually a pretty important thing because while Mark is telling a story to show us who Jesus is, right? He's choosing to leave some things out because you can't tell everything Jesus did, right? The Apostle John said, if you put everything that Jesus did down, it would fill up all the books in all the world, right? And so when you tell a story, you leave some details out that aren't pertinent, and you tell other details that are important, so you can express what you want others to hear and learn from that story, even if it's a real life story, right? You don't often tell people what kind of pants you were wearing in any story that you were telling unless something happened to those pants or those pants caused something in the story, right? Richard Bachman says that in his book, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, that irrelevant details are the hallmark of legitimate eyewitness accounts, right? So the fact that Jesus is sleeping, that he's on a pillow, that, he went off and left the crowd, though some boats followed, right, are all telling us that Mark is sharing what actually happened, right? He's sharing a real story in real time. The ancient peoples, when they told stories, they just told whatever details were necessary to develop a character or further plot, right? Modern stories, they put all sorts of weird things in, You watch like a lot of new movies and they're like zooming in on like a clown statue on the bookcase and it has nothing to do with the movie, or they're like showing the grass and a dog comes and relieves himself in the yard. Does nothing to do with furthering the story or the character development, right? And they do that because they want it to seem realistic, right? But in the ancient world, that's unheard of, right? Not for like myths and legends, right? So this says this is an eyewitness. Peter, who was there and who had Mark write down his testimony, says, yeah, I remember. Jesus wasn't in the front. He was in the back, and he was on this pillow. And we're like, where'd you get that pillow, Jesus? We've been outside all day. And yeah, we wanted to get away, but some of the boats followed us. Right? It was a long day, and we needed to get away from the crowds. But some, they had boats, unfortunately. They followed us, right? And so it shows us that this is a real story. Happened at a real time to real people. Verse 39, look at that. We'll continue here. Let me see, I got to find it. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And the disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." Right. So what does this tell you about Jesus? What does this tell you about Jesus? He seems so regular. Yeah. Normal dude gets tired, right? Sleeping in a boat. Yeah. What else does it tell you about Jesus? He's a master of all things. That's right. Anything else kind of surprise you? Yeah, Martha. Yeah. The forces of nature recognize him as the master, right? We've heard this voice before. He said, "Let there be trees, let there be land, and let the water be separated from the land, let there be light." Right? They recognize the voice of their Creator, and the people don't. Right? Tells you something about people. Right? By nature, since our first parents rebelled, right, what did they do? They hid from God. Right? They in order to rebel, they had to say, "I know God said this, that I'm okay, that I'm his child, that I'm safe, that I have everything I need, but I don't want to listen to him, and I want to make up my own reality." Right? And ever since then, ever since they rebelled, they're doing the same thing. Nope, I'm not as bad as you say I am, God. No, my way is better. It's okay if I do whatever I want with my body, with whoever I want. It's okay if I cheat and steal and kill to get ahead. It's okay if I make my life about me and build my own kingdom. Your ways aren't great. I don't care about you. I don't know if I can even trust you. I can trust me. All right? We're not listening, even though God is near us, near each one of us, calling us back to him. We're like a little kid going, la, 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 la. Right? I can't hear you. I'm fine. I'm not going to die. I'm not in trouble. Right? You can't help me. I can do it on my own. What happens eventually, something in life shakes our fingers out of our ears, and we realize that we're not in control. We realize that we need help. We realize that if God doesn't come down and rescue us, we're lost. We're going to sink beneath the waves. Right? Does anything else amaze you about this or strike you as strange? Yeah, Martha? Yeah, it kind of shows the human side, right? He's exhausted. He's worn out. I've been sleeping sometimes, and when the babies were born, and still today, once in a while, I wake up and I got this hand hitting me, and my wife goes, "Why weren't you helping me?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She either had a cramp in her leg or something and was going, ow, 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 and jumping out of bed, or there were kids crying or screaming, and she asked me to help, and she thought I was just faking it or something, right? And I was dead to this world, baby. I was in slumberland, right? And Jesus seemed to be so exhausted from a day of healing and a day of teaching, right, that he is out cold. Right? It shows really the human nature of Jesus. But then by contrast, you see something amazing. Right? In a way that, like, if you were sitting next to your kid right now and they were acting up, you'd be like, "Quiet, shh." In the same way, Jesus just kind of looks up at the wind and the waves and he says, "Quiet. Still." Right? And it's two Greek words. It doesn't say "be stilled." It's actually in Greek, it just means still. Still yourself, kind of. But it's just one word. It says two simple words, and the wind stops and the wave stops. All right? Now, for those of you who, have spent considerable time by a beach or something, right, you know that if a storm is raging, when the storm stops, do the waves stop? No, they go on. They can crash against the shore for hours afterwards, right? But the wind stops completely, and the sea becomes crystal smooth, right? Yeah, Len. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So Jesus is the one who led him out there. Right? Jesus is the one who said, "Let's go to the other side of the lake, get away from everybody." He leads them to the storm. Right? And that's a tough thing to deal with. Sometimes God allows us to enter the storms of this life. Right? But is he far? He's right there with them. Right? He's right there in the midst of the storm with them. Right? In the ancient world, right, there was a consensus amongst all of the religions, all of the myths, that the sea was something completely and utterly uncontrollable except by God. Only the Creator, or only the strongest gods, if you think of like the Greek religion or something like Poseidon, could control the sea. All right, and in most of the Middle East religions, it was the Creator who could control it. All right, even if they didn't consider that Creator to be the God of the Israelites. All right, and the sea was called the place of chaos. All right, it was a place where chaos ruled. It was a place of death. It was a place that could control all people. No one could stand up to it. So if you went out on the sea, you were risking your life and putting yourself in the hands of chaos, and you better pray to the gods because there was a high likelihood that you might not make it. Right? What's interesting is that when you read the Bible and you see the book of Revelation, before the throne of God is a crystal sea. Right? Chaos is stilled. All right? Other places it says there was no more sea. There was no more ocean. All right? And it's not saying that there's no whales, no dolphins. Like, why, God? It can't be heaven without those lovable creatures. No. What he's saying is that chaos is no more. Right? The place of the enemy is gone. Right? And even in all that figurative language, the beast, the dragon, comes out of the sea, right? The enemy, Satan, right? And so it's really a place not only of that's uncontrollable, but a place of the enemy in a way, right? It signifies the work of Satan, our adversary, who wants to kill, steal, and destroy, who wants to disrupt all the ordering God had done in creation, who wants to take away everything that God's given us for life, and to take away our life, right? And what's interesting is when Jesus stills this sea, right? He doesn't say in the name of, right? He doesn't call upon any higher power like healers or miracle workers in the ancient world. Right? He doesn't call upon anybody, right? And it shows that he's not just one who can give you rest. As we said a couple weeks, he's not just one who can give you rest, but he is rest himself. And here it's showing that he's not one who just has power, but he is power himself, right? And everyone who has power has it on loan from him. Right? He's the source of power. He's God himself. Another interesting thing is he doesn't like roll up his sleeves and brace himself and pull out a wand like Harry Potter or Dumbledore, or like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, and pulls out his spear and says, "You shall not pass," and like he's there, he's in it, he's like, yeah. No, he just says, quiet, still. Right? He's in control. Right? He says it almost like, this is nothing. Don't even have to exert myself. He doesn't have to recite any magic spell. He shows that the wind and the waves are his children, and who know him and obey him. All right? So really we have two choices to believe here. All right, the first choice is that we are here as the result of a monumental storm, the Big Bang. All right, and by the blind forces of nature, we have somehow come to be in the state that we are in. But one day we're going to die and we're going to decompose, and eventually the sun's going to go out, and there's going to be a heat death in the universe, and there's going to be no one around to remember you. And no matter what you've done, good or bad, it doesn't matter. Because in the end, there's going to be nothing but death for everything in existence. All right? That storm is going to be stilled, and it's going to end in death. All right? The second choice is that if Jesus is who he says he is, there's another way to see life. Jesus is the Lord of the storm. Right? And no matter what the shape of the world is, no matter what the shape of your life is, no matter what the shape of your relationship or your health or your work, you'll find that Jesus provides all the healing and the rest and the power you can possibly want. Right? Those are your two choices. Right? So sometimes it doesn't seem that way. Right? We see in verse 38, the disciples come to Jesus and say, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? Don't you care? Are you listening? Are you paying attention? Do you see what we're going through?" See, before Jesus calms the storm, they're very afraid. What's funny is that afterwards they're terrified. All right. We'll get to that in a moment. Before, they're bailing water out of the boat. They're minutes from certain death. And they say, "Don't you care?" Right? And we've all been here, right? "God, why aren't you doing anything right now? Why aren't you answering me? Why aren't you showing up and acting in a way that I need you to act right now? Are you there? Are you awake? Do you even care?" And what's funny is that Jesus, when he gets up, he doesn't say, I'm sorry. I understand why you were afraid. Yeah, I'll try not to do that again. I'll try to answer right on time next time. No. He says, "Where's your faith? Where's your faith, guys? You know me. You know how I've provided for you. You know how I've demonstrated my power over the sick, over the broken, over the lame, over those who are in bondage, even to demons. You've heard me speak. You should have known you had nothing to be afraid of." Which is interesting here. Jesus, in a way, says, you should know that I allow my people to go through storms. But I'm here. So you had nothing to be afraid of. Right? So those two options again, right? Nature's your one option, and you're not in control of nature. Right? Nature doesn't love you. It'll wear you down. It'll destroy you. It'll take your body away. It'll wear that down. You'll die from either disease, disaster, or just the sands of time. Right? You have the power of the storm. That's one option, the power of the storm of nature. The other is that Jesus is the one who actually is in power of you. Right? You're not in control of him either, which is scary. Right? Jesus is just as uncontrollable as the wind and the waves. All right? He lets things happen that we don't understand. He doesn't do always the things that we want or the things that we think that we need, especially right when we think we need them. All right? And Tim Keller, who I've told you before, we owe a lot to this series too. Right? He says, if Jesus is God and if he's big enough to blame for our problems, he's great enough to have a reason to let us go through them. So hear that again. If God is big enough to blame for our problems, he's great enough to have a reason that we can't understand for us to go through them. Right? He's God. He's in control. He's so much bigger than us. Right? He's the only safe place is in the will of God. Even if it looks dangerous. Even if those winds are howling and the waves look like they're going to overtake you and the boat of your life seems to be filling up. If you are in the will of God, if you know Jesus, if you trust him, you are in the safest place despite the stuff that's going all around you, going on all around you. Right? Right? And Tim Keller also says, because he's good and you're not, his will is necessarily immeasurably, unspeakably beyond our notions, our largest notions of what he's up to. Right? Because he's good and he's perfect, and because we're broken, because of our rebellion, and because he's God and because we're not, by necessity, he's going to do stuff and allow stuff in our lives that we have the faintest idea of what he's up to. We can't comprehend it. We don't see how good can work out of it. He doesn't seem safe, right? As we said at the beginning of the series, right, as the kids in the book of Chronicles of Narnia show up and they talk to the beavers and they say, he's a lion, so he's not safe. And they say, of course he isn't safe. Who said anything about safe? But he's good, I tell you. He's a king. Right? He does stuff that we don't understand, but he's good. He's as untamable as a wild lion in Africa. But he's got the greatest heart for his children. And while he allows difficult things as a result of our rebellion in this world, he ultimately allows everything for our good and for the good of those who will know him through our testimonies, right? For their salvation and for ours. So there's something else, too, that's happening here in this story. For the Jewish people of Jesus' day, who knew the Old Testament really well, they'd know that this story is very close to another story. Does anybody know what that story is? Jonah. That's right. In the book of Jonah, the whole premise of that book is that there's a prophet named Jonah, and God comes to him and says, hey, Jonah, you know how I always send you to my people, to the good people, to the Israelites, my nation, the people I love? Guess what? I love everybody. And I'm not the God just of the Hebrews, just of one people, but I'm God of this entire world because I made it. I want you to go to the Assyrians in Nineveh. The Assyrians were wicked dudes. Right? They'd come in and they'd kill all the men in the village and cut off their heads and pile them up by the entranceways of the villages, or cut out their tongues and leave them everywhere along the road, so that as you traveled through their empire, you said, these are dudes I don't want to mess with. As they came to you and said, we can either be at war or you can be our servants and enter our empire, you'd say, okay, you guys are in control. We don't want any of this. All right? The most terrible storm of people that have lived, they're matching it probably. They're in the top 5 probably. Right? And God says, Jonah, I want you to go to the people of Nineveh, the Assyrians, the people who threaten to destroy you, and I want you to tell them to turn from their rebellion so that they can live. So I won't have to destroy them, so they can have life, so they can know me. And Jonah says a couple things in his heart. I don't want to go to them because I don't want them to hurt me. And he also says, I don't know if I believe in God if he wants me to go to them. Because God wants me to be safe, not to be in harm. And he also says, I don't really want them to be saved. They're dirty. They hurt people. They're some of the worst people out there. They don't deserve to know your love like I do. So what Jonah does is he runs away. Right? In the ancient world, right, you had all these city-states, and they all kind of had their own gods. And if your city beat another city, it showed that your God was bigger. Right? And your God only had influence really over the land that you owned. And so Jonah kind of bought into the ideas of the people around him and said, I know I can run away from God. If I leave the land of Israel, he can't make me go. And so he gets on a boat in Tarsus, and he sails into the sea. And he's asleep in the boat And a great storm comes over, and all the sailors, experienced sailors, are throwing over everything that they could, trying to stay afloat. And then they go, where's Jonah? We remember he got on the boat with us a few days ago. They find him sleeping, and they say, Jonah, don't you care that we're about to drown? Pray to your God that he'll save us, or at least save your soul. And Jonah says, hey guys, there's a reason this storm is going on. It's because of my rebellion. Throw me out into the sea. Toss me into the storm, and you will live. Right here, pretty much everything that happens to Jonah happens, but Jesus wasn't tossed in the storm, was he? Maybe he was. Right? You see, in the book of Matthew, Jesus saying, just as Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of the fish, so the Son must spend 3 days in the belly of the earth. He says, one greater than Jonah has arrived. He says, I'm the true and better Jonah, even though I'm guiltless on this ship. And everyone is to blame because of their rebellion, to the hurts and the pains. Because everyone has brought this storm upon themselves in this creation, and I am blameless, I'll still bow my head into the storm. I'll stand in the center of the storm on the cross. I'll hang there and experience the worst that all of your rebellion deserves, all your rebellion has caused. Toss me in. And because I'll die, you will live. Jesus is the greater Jonah. He experiences the depths of the greatest storms of this world. And because of that, we have nothing to fear. We can't say in the deepest depths of our storm that God doesn't love us, because he's already experienced it all. And he's made a way out through his Son, Jesus. Right? If that's true, how does that change our lives? If that's true, how does that affect us during our storms? You can let him take care of everything. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. We can enter storms with boldness and courage, knowing God's allowing it and he will use it for the good of his kingdom. And be like Washington crossing the Potomac, with his foot up on the bow, the flag of Jesus in our hands. Because we know he's in the boat, right?